So really pleased about the work that we're going to be doing. But before that, we have an activity that we want you to engage in. We have set up a number of Jan boards throughout the presentation, and this time I'm going to turn it over to Ken Fells. But prior to that, I'm going to just stop and pause a moment to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We also want to give honor and respect to our elders who have come before us, who have enabled us to be here today and to be engaged in this work the way we have been because of the work that they have undertaken. And many are no longer here with us today, but we take this time and we pause to honor them. So thank you. Ken, if you want to lead us in the favorite quote activity. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's Ken Fells speaking. I'd like to take this time to echo what Ms. Marlene says, but I'd also want to respectfully honor those folks we've lost through COVID-19, and particularly our elders and our friends who've passed away recently. So if we could take 10 seconds, please, just to do that, and we'll get right into the activity. Certainly, with thanks and blessings, Ashe, as we move forward. The Jamboard are quotes, and this is for all you individual people out there who like to take quotes home. This is your opportunity to go into the Jam room, which has been put into the chat room right now. And once you get into that Jamboard favorite quote, the purpose is to pick out a quote that best resonates with you. So now some people on the line have already done that, and we've also got some additional quotes that we're going to put on at the end just to see how people move forward. So we've duplicated the activity, but the idea is to place yourself today where you are, why you volunteered your time to come and listen to the African Nova Scotia framework, and take a quote that best represents you. And we'll get into that activity as soon as you do that. That'll take about 3 to 5 minutes, and then we'll call everybody back. So if you go into the chat room right now, there'll be a piece of information. You can go onto the internet and go to the Jamboard. It's written right there, and click on that. We'll give you 3 to 5 minutes to pick up one quote. Please and thank you. And we'll come back in about 3 to 5 minutes. You should look at all the quotes.
I think we need the link to the Jamboard.
It's on the...
What comes up is
it's in the chat room. Yes. Sister Moodle just put it in for everybody.
Yeah, that's the breakout. It's the breakout room, not the Jamboard.
Yes, the breakout room is the Jamboard, and you'll go according to your birthday into which room. The first one, however, is for everyone to go into.
So just keep in mind, folks, that in this Jamboard room, everybody should be in this one. When we go through further activities, we'll separate everybody by their birthday so they can go into the specialist rooms and provide feedback to us. I know for some people it's taken this time to load, but just be patient. It will all come up. So you have about 2.5 minutes left, folks.
Ken, we have someone in the chat asking what they do with the quote they chose.
We'll get to that once everybody's had a choice, and we'll probably invite people to acknowledge why they chose that quote once everybody has made their choice. We'll probably won't get everybody to do that. We'll probably give people to volunteer. So you have about 30 seconds left, folks. If people can make their way back, certainly be appreciated.
Ken, I just have another question in the chat. How do they indicate their selection? Or they just...
We'll get to that in just a few seconds. So good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I know there's been a number of questions in the chat, and so now we can continue on with the activity. This is an opportunity to actually think about what you've selected. On the other hand, it's very important that you understand that this is a safe learning environment. So by that, I mean, this is an opportunity for you to speak truth to power. And we're here to listen to you because we want to use the dynamics of this presentation to certainly ensure that we build a better product for when we roll it out, just like we're doing with some of the other products we have. So if anybody would like to identify themselves by speaking, and just we'll take 2 or 3 people from whatever region, it doesn't matter, to read their quote and why you have come to volunteer yourself for the presentation today. Who would like to start?
I don't mind starting. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm Anne LeBlanc. I work in Dartmouth at Bel Air in elementary. And I chose the quote, in a racist society, it's not enough to be non-racist. We must be anti-racist, because I know I need to up my game. I'm a white person, and I know that I want to have better discussions in my elementary classroom, and to sort of be better prepared for that, and to try to meet everybody's needs. And this is something clearly, that I've been working on, but I know I need to work more on it. So that's why I chose that quote.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's by Angela Davis, I believe, correct?
Yes, it is.
So anybody else? We've had our first volunteer. She gets the $50 prize. So come on now. I know we can do better than that.
I chose injustice in Darcel. Anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I chose that because I think when we don't work to challenge problems and situations, it just leads to challenges elsewhere. So it's better for us to act in the moment when we see things that are wrong.
Thank you so much, Ms. Darcel. And great follow-up to that as well. Anybody else?
I'm Carolyn. I'm a principal in HRCE. And I chose the one by Marian Anderson. No matter how big a nation is, it is no stronger than its weakest people. And as long as you keep a person down, some part of you has to be down there to hold him down. So it means you cannot soar as you might otherwise. And a lot of my learning recently has been into the ideas of individualism and collectivism. And I really love the idea of we all need to rise together, and we're responsible for each other.
Thank you so much for your comments. I really do appreciate that. I think Nancy Delachevre, I believe you were next.
Hi, yes, Nancy Delachevre. I teach at Halifax West. I picked James Baldwin's quote, "Ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have." I think for me, working in a system where predominantly the people in positions of power, it's been easy for them not to see like the racism and some of the issues that happen because it doesn't impact them. And it's easy not to make changes when it doesn't impact you. So I feel like that's our biggest piece we have to overcome. It's looking at the leaders at the table and who's there and who's making the decisions, because racism would be over if the right people were at the table.
Thank you for that comment. We'll take one more. And then what I would suggest we do is, if you feel compelled to, and if you don't, it's up to you. You can put your comments in the chat box because you have to remember there are some people who are online by phone and they can't see some of the things that we're looking at. So we can read those out. So please use the chat to provide other details. So one more person and then we'll move on to the next slide. One more volunteer.
Hi, my name is Brian Yee, and I'm a social worker with APSI. And while I wasn't able to access the quotes, I identify as family of bicultural, biracial background, and my questioning or interests are in the areas of intersectionality with disability and racialization. and the challenges that come of, I'll say, quote, passing as white in our world, and how do we move forward those conversations in safety to support people who are questioning and learning.
Thank you so much for that. Just to give you a bit more information, Brian, because I don't believe you were on the call yesterday for the anti-racism piece. We do have a storage board on there where you can actually participate, and we put that up already. And we've already had about 37 people who have volunteered, so we can probably put that in the chat room again today. And if you click on that, you can add your name if you want to, and that would be one of the focus about discrimination and intersectionality, actually.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
So we'll move on now, folks. So we'll go on to the next slide, Ms. Marlene. Thank you, everybody.
So thank you, everyone, for sort of jumping into that activity and at this point sharing the ways in which you're connecting. And even if you didn't have an opportunity or take the opportunity to share, we're going to ask you to hold on to that quote because we'll be sort of looping back to that later on in the morning towards the end. We appreciate the quotes because they are underscoring what we as a branch believe in and are committed to, and as part of the Department of Education, what we are working towards. The outcomes for today are quite simple. The first one being reiterating that Black student lives matter. They matter to the children, they matter to the families, they matter to us as educators, they matter to our system. The second one is in regards to a document that's now available on the department's website, is that as we are sort of moving into the inclusive education policy and the rollout of that policy, also connected to that is the call for all of us to ensure that we are valuing the lives of students, Black lives, within our provincial education system. And we have, as of June, this past June, 7,459 African Nova Scotian students and students who identify as being of African ancestry. And so we are all compelled to support them as they are part of the educational system and looking to us to ensure that they have an educational space that is inspiring, that is safe, that is welcoming. The next item for today is really thinking through what that change in practice will mean to promote the achievement and well-being of our learners. And lastly, we hope to reiterate through our work that we're doing today is the expediency and the rationale for why we have taken the time to develop a framework which will support the advancement and the achievement and the well-being of Black learners. The vision that we're going to be speaking about is not ours. In fact, we're drawing on those who came before us, our elders who are still present with us and those who have gone before. And in the Black Report, it outlines very clearly what that vision is, and that is of a quality education that is accessible and equitable from the perspective of Black learners and their parents. And that was key because there are various understandings of equity, but what does an equitable education mean from the perspective of Black people, Black learners who are in our system, as well as their parents? That is the benchmark that we're working from. In addition to the Black Report, the Council on African Canadian Education, or as it's also known as CASE, also recommended to our Minister of Education the development of a framework that could sit within the Public School Foundation document to provide direction to the system staff around meaningful integration of materials into the curriculum and a sense of understanding of African Nova Scotian heritage, ways of being, and ways of knowing. Those directives have been very much a part of the work of the inclusive education policy. And as a branch, we have worked very deliberately and intentionally to embed those understandings, to embed those directives into the inclusive education policy. The inclusive education policy, as we know, was launched in 2019. It will be effective beginning 2020, this coming year. And there are explicit directives, some roles and responsibilities, guiding principles that outlined what our education system needs to do to deliver an inclusive and equitable education for all learners in the system. Connecting the inclusive education policy to the document that was shared with the system in June, the call to value Black lives is integral. The work is seamless. The inclusive education policy is connected to the valuing of Black lives, because within this document it says that all staff are compelled by the inclusive education policy to use their power and privilege to support Black students. And those are key words. And we heard from, I thought it was Anne, who was talking about being in the school system and the position, and others who shared their quotes around how can we use the power and the privilege that people already have in positions of authority. And Nancy, you spoke to this. How are they using that power and privilege to support Black learners? And what are the changes that are necessary so that that power and that privilege is used for rather than against students within the system? There are specific bullets that we have pulled out of the inclusive education policy to give an overview of the system responsibility for Black learners. It is not just the teachers, it's not the administrators. In fact, in the inclusive education policy, it outlines that the regional centers for education and CSAP, that they are to ensure that every employee is accountable to adherence to the principles. It also means that there has to be the allocation of appropriate resources to support the services. And lastly, the leadership that is required to improve the system towards an inclusive education model. We know right now within our system that we have dedicated staff, the regional coordinators of African Canadian education, who are working and have continued to work over the years to ensure that our learners in the system are inspired. They are focusing on their well-being and achievement. And they are also going forward in September 2020 to be seen as integral members of teaching support teams, student planning teams, program planning teams. All of those are necessary places for the coordinators to be, so that we can properly direct and provide the support that's going to be necessary to support students. The regional coordinators of African Canadian education, we are a new branch, fairly new branch that was created. They are now directly connected to African Canadian Services branch, as are the student support workers and those who are working on their behalf. We know that the leadership matters in the direction of the school. And so the inclusive education policy underscores the role and the responsibility of leaders who are leading their schools to more equitable places. Administrators are called to be responsible for that change. And we know that the changes that are necessary are going to require people to look at disaggregated data in different ways, and to understand that the gaps in learning that exist, the achievement gaps, or as we talk about them, the opportunity gaps, are not inherent to the students. They are the result of an unresponsive educational system that has been allowed to duplicate itself over the years. The inclusive education policy calls for the purposeful use of disaggregated data to monitor and evaluate how students are doing. The other bullet that falls under the responsibility of administrators is around using their power to empower the parents in their community schools to ensure that parents are also aware of their rights, their responsibilities, that we're now talking about in government family-led decision-making, that any decisions that are made for a child cannot be made with the consent and the input and the cooperation and collaboration of parents and the consensus of parents who are at those tables. Working with teachers as well around the instructional strategies. And so the teachers in the schools also need that support, and they also need that encouragement when they're doing the things, as we heard, necessary that are necessary to advance the well-being and achievement of Black learners in the schools. For the teachers who are on the call who are continuing to sort of work through a culturally responsive lens, we applaud you and we thank you for the work that you're undertaking to engage parents as well and to empower them in this system. We're going to hear a little bit later about what empowerment means from the perspective of the parents, but that is the ongoing work of the teachers as well as the administrators in the system. The support staff, we heard about the regional coordinators. We know student support workers are part of those teams. They are integral, and the inclusive education policy speaks to their roles. Parents and guardians, we actually begin with them. Their roles are integral. They are sending to us their children, their best. And it is our job to be able to bridge what it is that they are telling us and sharing with us about their most prized possession, and how are we receiving those children to ensure that they belong, that they feel safe. The parents are active members of their students planning team and the program planning process, as well as any meetings concerning the development of individual program plans. The empowerment of parents and guardians around the educational processes, and sometimes, as we know, we speak in educational speak, and there are a lot of invisibilities around processes, but inclusive education policy says that these need to be made public, these need to be visible. The school planning teams have an incredible responsibility to ensure as well that parents are involved in the decisions, that they're active members, and that we are seeking them out to ensure that they are participating and leading the discussions with respect to their child's education. Our framework hinges upon several crucial principles that I'd like to briefly go over. The first one being that a foundational tenet within our framework is that education is a right of every child in our system. Our 7,400 children who are enrolled in public school have a right to an education and a right to an appropriate education that leads them somewhere. And that this education should awaken the learners and empower the learners and inspire them to reach their purpose, their promise, and potential. Because we believe that every learner has a promise and a purpose. The second tenet that our public school system needs to be aware of is that spirituality is a foundational tenet within many African Nova Scotian communities, within the African Nova Scotian worldview, and that children are seen not just through a student lens, but they're considered to be a holistic, comprised of body, mind, and spirit. And in order for children to belong and be a part of Nova Scotia's public education system, we need to allow all these parts of the children to be present within the public school system and not to compartmentalize them. Thirdly, I mentioned about the Black Report, Reality Check, the Council on African Canadian Education. These bodies stem from a rich, a dynamic, a multi-generational history that is comprised of adults, elders who are with us, and those who are no longer here, who have passed forward wisdom, intelligence, a sense of resilience, and a sense of identity that they are here and have been here, and they have a right to education. And so knowing that moves our public school system from a deficit model that African Nova Scotian learners are in need of and need to be supported by. They are coming from communities of strength. We send them from communities of strength. We send them with a richness, a vitality, a joy for learning, and a joy for living. And it is our expectation that, as the inclusive education policy says, that is nurtured throughout their educational career. The last principle that we want to share and make sure is a part of the work that we're undertaking is that any of the curriculum and the learning resources that are used in our system, we want those resources to provide an accurate knowledge of who these students are, their histories, their ways of being, their ways of knowing in all curricular areas, so that when they enter school, when they enter classes, they see their own experiences. They see the experiences of their family members and their community members and their leaders. I'll now ask Doreen to sort of share the next couple of slides with us with respect to the framework. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joy Millette. How are the 7,459 children doing, and how do we know? A review of the reports and data clearly shows wide disparities in education between Black students and all other students. Next slide. All data displayed is taken directly from the Program of Learning Assessment for Nova Scotia. 2018-2019. This is a new assessment administered at the end of the grade 3 school year. The previous assessments were administered at the beginning of the school year. In reading, only 57% of the Black students achieved at levels 3 and 4, compared to 71% of all other students. 15 students were exempt, and 30 students were on IPPs and did not write. Overall participation rate of 92%. This is a new assessment administered at the end of the grade 3 school year. The previous assessments were administered in grade 4 at the beginning of the school year. In mathematics, only 60% of the Black students achieved at levels 3 and 4, compared to 73% of all other students. 18 students were exempt, and 28 students were on IPPs and did not write. Overall participation rate of 92%. Grade 6, reading and mathematics. How are Black students known in the system? Next slide. Grade 8 reading. Have these results become normalized? Next slide. Grade 8 writing performance. Do you feel a sense of urgency? Next slide. Grade 8 mathematics. Next slide. What are the long-term consequences for students, families, and communities? Next slide. Interrupting the system. The Black Report envisioned a quality education system for Black learners in Nova Scotia that is accessible and equitable from the perspective of Black learners and their parents by the year 2001. What is happening? Withdrawals, disproportionate IPPs, suspensions, racism and racial incidents, differential access to courses, programs, and opportunities leading to post-secondary pathways. How will we interrupt this system? How will we address the inequities so that everyone has the same chance of succeeding? Next slide. Inclusive education. In her own words, our Deputy Minister.
I think it stopped presenting. Or are you opening up a video?
I don't have the link for the deputy minister.
We're putting it up now. Thank you. We're going to start writing every conversation. Every proposal to write, every resource we can or what.
So Marlene just got booted out of the meeting. I will pose Nancy's question when she does get back. I just want to let you know that, Nancy. While we wait for her, I'll just pose the questions. Augie, Doreen, Ken, Melissa, if anyone wants to take a stab at these. Nancy's asking, are these assessments accurate depictions of ability? Has anyone ever compared how these children have scored on the assessments versus the grades they received from their teachers? Never mind. Suzanne, 1 second. Suzanne Webb in the chat also said, "Hi Nancy. As a school, we compare provincial assessments with school data, but I am not sure if this is done system wide." So, Ken, you want to take that one?
Well, I don't think it's a question of taking it. I mean, as a person who is involved in data collection, particularly when it comes to the school planning team, program planning team. So most folks who are on the call know what I'm referring to. And when we look at the assessments, that all comes down to how you provide that detailed information to your collaborative learning teams, your collaborative learning groups, and the amount of information you're getting back from your classroom teacher. So when you sort that information out and when you put it together, we know who needs to be tested and who's not. I think probably what the branch is looking at is key to the same question you're asking. Those folks who are being tested, those who aren't being tested. And the other perspective is the assessment data being used as the primary source, or is it used as part of the sources? Because we know in the classroom, when a teacher has a great connection with the children, they use those culturally relevant pedagogical approaches to know where the children are and know them where they are, then they're going to do better in class. When you do an isolated assessment test, which sometimes may not meet the cultural pieces that are necessary in an effective assessment across the province, then we know that our children at times may not actually comprehend what's being written in the assessment. That's why we do reviews. But then again, when we do the reviews, are our teachers, do they have the competencies to relay that information to all the students that are in front of them? And do they know the students well enough? So again, I go back to that school planning team, those assessments that take place in September. Do you have the accurate information in September when it transitions into the school to actually address the information that we're looking at and how we disaggregate the data, ensure the students are getting the best opportunity of success? So I realize that's a long answer, but from an administrative perspective, those are some of the detailed pieces that I would encapsulate when I look at how to support all of the children in the class, in particular those children of African ancestry in the province of Nova Scotia and Mi'kmaq heritage as well, but not excluding our impoverished children that come from the same marginalized communities.
And now a follow-up one from Madeline. Do you know what is happening that nearly 10% of students are on ITP? Oh, sorry, by third grade. You can go on the whichever one you'd like, Melissa.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
I'm sorry, you were cutting out there. I just saw Anne LeBlanc's comment pop up. So I just wanted to add to what Ken was saying. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Just about the which are the outcomes that the students would be learning in the classroom. So the importance of culturally relevant pedagogy within the classroom is shown through the fact that we need to build and bridge for the students so that when they get to writing an assessment, we've done the work, because assessment's not going to be culturally relevant. It's just, yeah, it's not going to be that. But what we do in the classroom to support the students, that builds them to a greater understanding, and we're building to improve the students, improve achievement for the students using those practices.
I do appreciate what Ms. LeBlanc has added too. I think that what she says is significant, and it's really important to understand that, yes, you're absolutely right, that assessments are only the reality for 2 to 6 weeks or even less. So please keep that in mind. One of the things that I'd add too to that conversation is how well are our educators placing the historical context of our children, particularly with those unconscious bias and microaggressions that come through a value system that we have, to support the children and to look at a different lens, a deeper lens of actually getting at some of those comprehensive skills, the conventions, those other pieces that really need to emphasize. Because when we look at the conventions, part of the assessment that it really reaches out to me are the conventions. 46% of children of African ancestry. Only 40 or 36% of those children are doing well in their conventions. So that's a really significant piece that I think, you know, we're talking basic conventions that people know. So what is missing between what's taking place in the classroom and when they're doing those assessments? Sorry, go ahead, Marlene.
I'll just interrupt if I can. And I could draw your attention to the individual program plan review. It's on the department's website. And we had a bit of technical difficulties, so I'm going to actually turn it over to Mr. Fells to continue. Thanks.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Just jumping in. Did the video show for you?
No.
Okay. Oh, it was very slow. Okay, thank you. We'll put it into the chat for people to see if you haven't. This was a video that would have been shown.
I put it in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. This was the same video that was shown, that was expected that regions would show in their regions last year heading into September. And so, and it reiterates the message that inclusive education and that it's everyone's responsibility and we can get it right. And there are things that can be done to correct this. Thank you. Maybe in the chat, if we can get a show of hands of people who have seen this video already. Can you just respond by saying, indicating yes or, yeah, great. Saw the video, okay, perfect. In person, wonderful, yeah. You know, and we continue to use it because we want people to understand that this is the leadership message. This is not just our branch who are echoing the concerns or our communities through the various reports, but this is now the direction that we're moving in as a system. Thank you. So I'll turn it over to Ken at this time. Thank you, Doreen.
If you could bring the presentation up again, please. What we're going to do at this time, folks, is we're going to watch a different video, and then we're going to move into some of our Jamboard rooms. So, Marlene, sorry, you could take that down, and I'll put that up.
Wisconsin does have a rich cultural and racial diversity. That's just who we are, but how it shows up in education, we can do better. When we come to this frame for Black children, it's this whole conversation around, we feel that there's something that's broken, that we need to fix it, that we have to treat them differently. No?
I'm good at math, reading, social studies, science. I'm really good at drawing and cooking.
Under the conditions that most people are working with in our schools, particularly those schools that are so-called at risk, they're put at risk. They're not at risk because of who's there. They're at risk because of how we treat them.
I actually had advanced classes this year.
And my grades is good. I just checked yesterday.
Children, they all have capital. We all have some unique gifts and talents that are innate to us. How do we tap into their best self?
I go in looking for treasure. I go into school, I want to see all kinds of opportunity, things that are already happening that you haven't even paying attention to, that you can work with right now. And I think we think too much in terms of technical fixes to what really is a cultural problem.
We have 93% attendance, so our students love coming to school. Every morning for announcements, we listen to a song by Nas, I Can. So we stick that in their mindset early on that they can accomplish and be whatever they want to be. It's important that they hear positive affirmations on a regular basis, because once they continue to hear that, they begin to believe it. And once it goes from their head hearing it, it goes to their heart.
When I think about my own teaching and classroom experience, you don't know what you don't know. If I knew that my experiences were different than the children that I'm teaching that are before me, I have some work to do.
All of our teachers, they've had professional development on building relationships with students, making sure they're checking their biases. And having 2 African American males at an elementary school have changed the dynamics and culture of our school.
Parents, families, and the school, they're all partners. So what do you do to finesse that? If you don't know who your students are, you don't know who the families are, then the absence of that relationship is not going to help teachers to be able to have positive learning outcomes.
I think our approach here is one based on love. I know it sounds a little corny, but love. Part of it's learning, part of it's social. You know, kids show up here every day to connect. Every student wants to feel like they belong. Student-teacher relationship is so important for that to happen. That there shouldn't be any embarrassment with being confused about something or not knowing or just flat out making a mistake.
You want to have a solid relationship and rapport and have a real interest in understanding where students come from, their communities, their families.
For anybody that's in education, you gotta be transparent. You gotta come out of yourself. My job is just to love them, reach them, and teach them.
We saw a need for a school-based mentoring program. We were able to find 2 wonderful gentlemen who want to do that work, and it's made all the difference in the world.
My favorite part is just talking with my brothers, how we can keep reaching our goals. If we didn't reach our goals all the way, we can just keep trying.
When we get kids sitting in circle, that alone begins to make a difference, building that mutual support. And it's also a space for them to have some real intellectual engagement that's not just academic, but just like really opening their minds.
When you got that education and you can go and you can start a career, start a family, and do all the things that you want, that's what makes you a man.
Lots of kids kind of feel shy talking about like their emotions. Here you can kind of be free and tell your brothers what's going on.
Can you imagine a child that has no voice? To have just somebody to just sit down and just don't say nothing, just listen to them. Like, I'm just gonna make this all about you. You just tell me what's on your mind, what's going on in your heart, what's going on at home, what's going on at school. How can I help you become great? And they just tell you everything. And just building that relationship with them to know that, hey, anytime something going on, I can go talk to Mr. White.
A teacher is not just an instructor. A teacher, through culturally responsive pedagogy, is also a mediator. You know, I'm not imposing my own beliefs on you, but I'm making sure that I'm opening up these doors of opportunity for you.
We have 25 students that are in the program. Everyone has improved in their math assessments. The average increase was 8 points in reading and 11 points in math.
Students are going to talk regardless. They want to be heard. They want to feel valued. And so having circles of support here to validate that, to get them to express themselves, to reflect on who they are and how they can grow as people has been tremendous.
I let them share as much as they want to share. And then when I feel like that they don't want to, I don't push them. The main important part here is about trust.
I like coming to the circle because I know that I can talk about anything to the girls in the group. In this circle, I just feel like I can be myself. It's like walking into a home that you can tell anybody anything.
Today we're going to open up a topic for just dedication and what dedication means to you.
Do good in high school.
Do good in high school?
Okay. You know how you have stuff like on the inside that you like have to carry on your back, weighs you down and make you get bad grades and stuff like that? Like you come in here and tell anything.
Hypothetically, after college, what type of career would you be pursuing?
Being an entrepreneur, you know, basically running my own business. Could be a doctor.
Doctor.
I want to be a surgeon or an OBGYN. I want to be a doctor. I want to be an orthodontist. Or
They look at this as a sisterhood of the natural circle of support. And what I'm encouraging teachers to do is to build a better relationship, and then there'll be a better understanding of, you know, how they come to school, what they feel, and what is important to them and what is real to them.
Circles started more than 10 years ago, and all Circles did is it created opportunity, created conditions to think out of the box that we usually think of in schools.
That role of facilitator is extremely critical because they're really that point between the students, between staff, and even advocating like on behalf of the students and the families at times. It's not just hard work, but it's heart work at the same time. Trying to connect on that human level. We teach them that you're really just there to facilitate. There's like a collective knowledge and each student brings something to the table, and it requires that you look at yourself. So what we try to do is really uncover and unpack what's really at play.
We're brought in to address a symptom. They discover, okay, these are the gaps in our school culture or the problems in our practice. This is what we really need to work on. Circles is a catalyst for change. It's not a program at all. When you change the peer culture, and when I say change, you draw out of kids what they already know and can already do, but now are motivated to, that's when the magic happens.
If we can be successful in life, that we can do it. Like you gotta show like the little ones that they have to do it to like succeed.
This is what we do to support what our students are capable of and the capital that families bring to the school.
Culturally relevant professional development, getting to know your students, what motivates them.
If you want to be culturally responsive, just talk to people. Talk to them about what they like to do outside of school. Talk to them about the most positive things that they love about their community. Just have that dialogue.
my teachers helped me get an education. They made me a great person.
Everyone realizing that they are in this together. You experience that from the front office staff to the cafeteria. There's an element of trust that you do have my best interests at heart.
So at this time, we're going to show the contrast video, which me and Melissa will actually bring it together in a Jamboard. So just keep in mind, one qualifier about the video, we don't practice affirmative action in Canada. So please keep that in mind. So I'm going to ask Melissa to join me now as we go to the next part of this presentation. So if Miss Marlene, if you could put the slides back up. I know that the breakout rooms are in the chat box. So actually, folks, based on your birthday, at this time, I'd ask you to make your way into the Jam board breakout discussion rooms. And in there, there'll be some questions. And we'd ask you to use the sticky note slides to provide feedback on both the presentations we provided and the presentations we've done so far, just what your thoughts are, how we can move forward. And if there are questions you have, you can put them in the chat as well. And what we've tried to do is present to you some of the concepts that do work and some of the concepts that have not worked. And if you have any suggestions or any ideas that you can provide to us when you're in the Jam board rooms, breakout rooms, it certainly would be helpful as well. So Melissa, you still on or no?
She did indicate she got bumped out, so she was going to be logging back in.
So just remind you that the breakout rooms are in the chat room, breakout room, and it's based on your birthday. So if your birthday is between January and April, folks, you go to that chat room, or that Jamboard room. If you are in, if your birthday is between March and August, you'd go in that Jamboard breakout room. And if your birthday is between September and December, you would go to that Jamboard room as well. So once again, there are actual sticky note slides in there. Just type your comments in there and you can use whatever color you want. And if you're not familiar with that, there are people in the rooms to provide support to you when you get there. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat box. Otherwise, we have about 7 minutes to do this, and then we'll be coming back. Morning, Carrie.
Carrie, can you mute your microphone?
Hi there. How's everybody doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
It's good. It's good.
I'm just checking out all the rooms, make sure people are here. Yes. There's supposed to be a Jamboard there. I'm just going to find out what's going on. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah, just a second. Yeah, I understand that. I'm just trying to find out what's going on. Everybody can get there.
I just went in, I see people are in there.
Go ahead, Marlene.
People are in the Jamboards. Some people might be having a little bit difficulty with, I see September to December. One person is. So when you go back to the main page for session, that's what the link has. And then you click on the Jamboard. It'll take you to the Jamboard sessions, or you can go in underneath your birthday.
So what she's saying is you have a choice to be in the jam. It's not, but that's why we have a discussion in that room. In the Jamboard room, you can put your sticky note up. You can go between the two rooms.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, you're in two rooms. You're in one room for discussion. And if you want to put a sticky note up about your comment, which I didn't explain correctly, then you can go back to the Jamboard to that particular room and put a comment up about the videos. Does that sound reasonable?
Mm-hmm. I see there's 20 people in room number 1. I found their way. Mm-hmm. Oh, Brian, I see Brian, he doesn't have a GNESPES account, so we could email LRTS around that one. I'll do that now. Suzanne, and I'll check and see what's happening with you for your, as you're in there, but you can't see the sticky notes.
No, I can't see anything.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, I've just pulled the link from the web page. I'm going to post it into the chat session. That'll take you back to the main registration page.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then from there, you click on Jamboard sessions. Thanks, Brian.
Our group is returning to the main room.
Thanks, Melissa. I was just going through the rooms. I see lots of sticky notes and ideas.
So we're bringing everybody back. Melissa, do you want to see if anybody would like to share?
Sure. I see, I've been looking through the Jamboards and there are a lot of great comments and questions. So would anyone like to share something from their Jamboard?
I'm always ready to share, so I can start. I don't mind. One really positive thing I thought, it's about relationships, which we've been seeing. If anyone's on Twitter, I'm all over it. But you know, relationships are so important. So it doesn't really matter. Like, not that it doesn't matter, but it's important to have relationships with all our students. And it looked from the first video especially important to try to understand from their point of view. And then the other thing I posted, and since it is a safe place, I have had difficult situations where I'm trying to connect with parents of African descent, and I've needed more help and I don't know where to go. So sort of we got a positive, and then I sort of have, I need some help. I need to know where I should go if I'm trying to, I ended up in an adversarial relationship that I didn't want, but I just, it was really hard to figure out how to get out of it.
Right. I saw that comment. That's it's really important creating strong relationships, and it really supports the students with their learning and with just their sense of belonging in the school, especially the students and their families. I think that one of the places in schools where if you need that support, the African Nova Scotian student support workers are a great resource to have to make that connection. If you're feeling like you need a connection or someone to sort of build a bridge between you and the parent, African Nova Scotian student support workers The regional educators are another resource. Yes, Marlene just brought that up.
Thank you.
So there are
Yeah, one of the
resources
things
there, yeah.
too that one of the other things too that is going to help is going to be the anti-racism and anti-discrimination module for administrators, because once we roll that out, they'll certainly be able to support you in a greater opportunity to bring that to the forefront. That's what we're developing now.
That's great.
And I'm just going to chime in. Thanks, Anne. I was just going to chime in. It's Marlene speaking here. You know, anytime, even just to call the branch, and we'll be able to sort of direct you, even answer some of the questions and provide support as well.
I'm taking notes. Nope, that's great.
Would anyone else like to share something that they posted on their Jamboard? I think I'll just read some of what I'm seeing here. One that I see is relationships are the key to everything. Relationships are so important. Continuing to build positive relationships with our students, communities, and the communities. Learning cannot happen in an unsafe environment. Being empowered to make change. Let's check the other one. Using culturally responsive pedagogy in classrooms across all subjects. And I think even with that, leading with cultural responsiveness, leading our schools, student support workers. Someone shared that student support workers host sharing circles as often as needed to make sure student voices are heard and issues are brought to light. Like that's great use of the student support workers.
There's a really
ahead,
good one
Ken.
there in chat. There's a really good one in chat room 3. An African Nova Scotian Achievement Support Worker pilot who works with students one-on-one and connects with teachers to close gaps that appear, however, they are only in 2 days per week. And that's something that I think provincially we're looking at, because I know in the South Shore we were looking at implementing that as well. So that's something to move on up. And I'm pretty sure that the branch will have a look at that as well. Back to you.
Yeah, I see one here. It talks about critical reflection is needed to show historical schools for students who have been, just 1 second. Oh, so critical reflection. So it's, I believe that it's talking about the students in schools historically been racialized and the impact that has, and reconciliation practices are needed for those communities. Very true. Having lots of opportunities, so preventing trauma is having lots of opportunities for mentors, safe place. So lots of great ideas have been placed on the Jamboard, and thank you all for sharing your thoughts and your ideas of how you're supporting African Nova Scotian students. So
can I just mention a couple more?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have an equity team who desegregates school data, identifies students, visits schools several times a year, and has updates progress based on school classroom support. We also support the schools in but it ends there. But I think that's beautiful. Those are some of the things that we need to get out there to support the administrators, right? And have a chance to sit down and look at the schools, to look collectively at the whole population of the school and create some beautiful data walls to work at the micro levels of working with children. How to make concrete changes in the system that's racist. Does it make sense to have our own Afrocentric school? After watching the video, our Black learners deserve to see people who look like them in all our schools and all levels. And it's amazing some of the things that people have picked up on, that we can actually provide some different. See, I'm just reading another one. It's inspiring to see some of the things that we see. So it's amazing to me. You folks have been amazing. Thank you. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Melissa.
No, I'm going to second that, Ken. Just really amazing to see the comments, and you know that just in viewing those comments, I know that people are making a commitment to practices that are going to engage and support African Nova Scotian learners. So it's just wonderful to see. We just need to keep maintaining that same commitment to supporting our learners so that we can see the results. So I'm going to, I think we'll move on to our next slide.
I'll send her a text. Okay.
Yeah, just have some.
Just checking to make sure that you're seeing the framework on the page now.
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So what we wanted to do was, of course, oh, there we are. What we wanted to, of course, was to be able to address more of the systemic issues that are happening here within our system for African Nova Scotian Black learners. And we've organized that structure or that framework according to 5 specific pillars. And these are based on the things that we've heard from parents and community and documents about what's important in creating a successful place of learning for Black learners here in our province. The first thing was the authentic self-identification. And that is being able to, for families and parents to be able to self-identify in ways that are important to them, but also surrounding that is creating that culture of safety that would enable and empower parents to self-identify. The second pillar is knowing them as they are known, and that speaks to that cultural, familiar understanding of who our learners are. Our educational programming and services, we'll speak about that in a little bit more detail, empowering parents and families, as well as equitable access and involvement. So let me now just talk a little bit more around the detail. So with respect to authentic self-identification, we know that we have close to 7,500 students who self-identify as African ancestry. But within those 7,500 students, we know we have many students. Some of the students are coming from the 50+ African Nova Scotian communities. Other parents are identifying as being African. From the content, we have students who are coming from a more Latin background. There is diversity that exists within that 7,500 population. And a key link to identity is enabling families to identify in the ways that make sense to them. So we have been really deliberate in sort of gathering the information around, how do people want to identify, so that the moment that students enter school on that the registration form, families are going to be able to see themselves and to be able to identify in ways that make sense to them. Pillar number 2, the knowing them as they are known, which has become really a saying that we continue to use, that if you know the students as they are known in community, which speaks to that relational aspect, then they will be successful, because as they are known by their families and their community, it is from a position of strength and not one of deficit, that there's something missing or lacking. And we know that the perceptions that we have of our students influence the actions that we undertake. So we are very adamant in recommending and highlighting the fact that our families and communities have histories and knowledges, and their understandings of who their children are need to be at the forefront. So knowing them through their own ways of knowing and being are critical. The third pyramid, or pillar rather, in the framework is empowering parents and family. And we know this is crucial, and not from the perspective of trying to build interest in education or trying to get them engaged in education. Our perspective of empowering parents and families assumes that children and their families are already engaged in education. They're already interested in education. When you see them sending them to school on the first day, you can see our children are dressed up, they have all their supplies, they're entering school excited. That excitement and interest in schooling has been built into them. So they are coming to school expecting an education. And we know that as far back as the 1800s, when our communities have advocated for an educational system. So it's not that we need to build interest in education for our Black families. What we need to do is to deconstruct some of the systemic barriers that really prevent parents from engaging in education in ways that make sense to them. And some of our work as a department will be definitely around identifying what those barriers are, but also supporting parents in understanding what their rights are. Because in the inclusive education policy, as we showed earlier, parents have a right to be involved in education and have a right to be leading the conversations around their child's education. Number 4 speaks to the educational programming and services, and Doreen spoke about that earlier. We had the data to speak that we're expecting a change in the way that our parents experience education, but also the students. What is the programming that is undertaken on their behalf? What types of services are being provided to them? So are there services and programming that are building their competencies around the public school program, or is it more inclined with moving them away from public school program? For example, the individualized programming that happens, and we're concerned when it happens for children who don't require an education, individualized education program. For the students who might need that, absolutely. But our data tells us that there are disproportionate numbers of students that have received an individualized program. And the outcomes of that is that it moves them away from successful pathways that are going to nurture their goals. Number 5 speaks to equitable access and involvement. And this one, in this pillar, we are primarily highlighting what are the avenues that our staff, who are our African Nova Scotian staff that are working in our buildings, what are the pathways that need to be open? What access points, what resources do they need in order to do their job, and meaningful involvement in the educational system? The most recent action has been around their access for the student support workers to the TINET. There is a role for them that has been specifically designed for student support workers in order to receive referrals, to be able to document the work that they're doing on behalf of students and their families, and support they're providing to schools and teachers in particular. That role has now been enabled, that professional learning took place over the last year, so that now they will be able to utilize that form the same way other people are utilizing that form. The equitable access, of course, also speaks to our students and our parents. What are the access points for our students and parents that we're concerned about and thinking about? So 5 pillars, 5 focus, and we want to share with you, as a result of our framework and the focus of the pillars, the priorities that we are focusing in on and moving forward as a branch. The first one is increasing the African Nova Scotian staff and the meaningful services and supports that are required. in the inclusive education rollout for this year, there will be a number of student support worker positions that will be allocated. We know at this point that not every child has access to a student support worker in their school, in their region. That is one of our goals as well as increasing staff in other areas of our system, regional centers for education and CSAP. The increased presence within the public school framework, I mentioned. The formal monitoring and evaluation of the success of adaptations and the individualized program plans for our students. We know, as our documents say within our province, that the adaptation should be moving Black learners towards the achievement of curriculum outcomes. If they're not doing that, then there is a problem in the ways in which they are being used. That is the purpose of the adaptations. We're concerned that the adaptations are being used as a pathway to move students towards an individualized program plan. And so therefore, the monitoring and the evaluation of the success of those adaptations are crucial. Our session yesterday spoke to the anti-racism and anti-discrimination leadership framework that's being developed to support leaders. And in that, there is the expectation that racial incidents and racism will be appropriately responded to within a timely and reported out and reported on in a timely way. We saw the data earlier, so we know it's not acceptable for a benchmark of 53, 54, 37, 43% of our learners achieving the expectations at in math or reading at grade 3, grade 6, grade 8, grade 10. That is unacceptable. So increased performance at level 3 and level 4, which means that students are either meeting or exceeding the outcomes. The other two bullets are with respect to increased presence of our students in a variety of advanced placements and opportunities such as IB, advanced placement courses, O2, discovery opportunities, skills trades. Those are the places where we want to see our Black learners, and increased graduation rates and post-secondary confirmations. I'm now going to turn it over to Augy and Melissa around the next Jamboard breakout discussions that we are going to be asking you to join. Thank you.
Marlene, before we go there, there's some questions in the chat. Do you mind if I pose them for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Madeline had she posted, I'm concerned about the demands on the student support workers to be in multiple schools and how it makes challenge for continuity of relationships with students and staff. It was more a statement. And then Carol had, authentic self-identification challenges me to recognize that a single label, African descent, cannot possibly capture the ethnic diversity within the communities that ascribe to that label as a description of part of their lived experience. And I know that's something that we've been dealing with at the branch, so I thought I would leave that for your words, Marlene.
Thank you. Yes, so thank you very much. And thank you for the questions. Absolutely. One of the sort of actions that we have been taking up on behalf of the student support workers now that they are connected with our branch is around hearing from their voices and their experiences. So the last academic year, Augy worked with the student support workers and the RCs to really get a sense of what it is that not only have they experienced, but what are they interested in and how can we best support them. We know that we need more of this staff in our regions, and we're working very deliberately over the last number of years to increase that complement, because you're right, it becomes a challenge. Question around access to the presentation. Yes, it'll be posted, I believe, on a website, and we can certainly make that available to you. Authentic self-identification. Yes, Litzy?
Oh, sorry, you're reading down the chat, so you're going to get to Nancy's question at the end.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect. I'm just making sure I cover everyone's. Yes, exactly. So we know that the registration form, the authentic self-identification is really critical, because we've heard from Black families that they want to choose to identify, and so families will have an opportunity to identify the ways that make sense to them, and that single label of African descent, we know is not responsive to what our parents and communities want. And for their underreported in high school. Yes, so you're right that as of right now, the regions are responsible and the schools are responsible for the monitoring and the recording of racial incidents. This will be picked up as part of the anti-racist leadership module, because we know that it is integral that they not only record them, but it's the response to them that builds community. We know, we've heard that they are underrepresented, absolutely. We're more concerned with how are they dealt with, how are children being responded to, are they being acknowledged, are they being validated, and what is the relationship that is built after that incident, so that we can build that sense of trust between the communities and families. Thank you very much for all of your questions. So we're going to move now into the Jam boards, and I'll let Augy continue from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlene. So similar to what we did previously, and we do appreciate the chance for people to put sticky notes onto the Jam board and for us to go forward taking people's ideas. From the very beginning, when we were putting this framework together, we did not do it as a team of ACSB, and we just put our heads together and did it with the 8 or 9 people that are working at our branch. We definitely went to community and regional coordinators and student support workers. And so right now, today is a chance for the group that's with us today to give their opinions and things that we should be paying attention to, and some of the things we're doing and some of the things we're not, because we're definitely taking these things and what we hear from the community and from professionals that are in the education system and applying them. And one of the things that Marlene said from the beginning when I started here was, we want to make an impact. We want to make an impact. So with that, we want to make sure that we are trying our best to not only come up with policies, but make life better on the ground for every kid of African ancestry that goes to school. So what we're going to do now is, with the breakout groups, let's go to the chat again, because I think the breakout groups are there, and it will be very similar to what we did previously. So if you could go in again through your birth month, that just a random way for us to try to divide up the group. We seem to have about 28 to 27 people participating. So pick a breakout room to go into. And Marlene, can you just give a little bit, or Ken, how long do we have? It's now 10 minutes to 11. So how long do you want the breakout groups to be?
I think we could stay with the 7 minutes for the breakout room. So when you go to the breakout rooms, you have to leave the main room. I'm gonna just set a timer, and I'll come into each of the breakout rooms to let you know how much time is left before we need to come back here. I just wanted to share some of the comments that we have on the Jam board. So are we hitting the right areas? Let's see. What resonates with you and what else is necessary? So people share their ideas there. So one of the comments that came up was struggling to see how to put themselves in African Nova Scotian, in the shoes of African Nova Scotian families when not being a person of color. And I think someone shared a comment that really fits with that, just saying that you can visit communities and immerse yourself in culture that you aren't familiar with. So just doing the work to really get to know the communities that you're working in or working with, the families that can all support that sense of understanding. What will be done to better support Black educators who are trying to be positive influence on Black learners' lives when they're themselves trying to survive a system rooted in discrimination and racism? Is a really great question to ask. It is important to make teachers feel supported with increased scrutiny on adaptations and IPPs rather than on the opposite. Some of the things that resonated with people was the language of an authentic, strength-based perception of our students. The pillar on family and community involvement is so important, and we need to do so much more work in that area. What else is necessary? This is asking the question, how can we support educational teams to ensure that they reflect the diversity of community? The lens of intersectionality on racism and disability is needed within all levels of educational programming. In order to truly build relationships with students and school staff, school staff has to know students as they're known and their families and communities. Love that. So the person said that they love this pillar. Reflecting to my power and privilege, I need to continue to be actively listening and learning. Awareness of bias and prejudice is so important. How can we ensure policies are anti-racist? It's really important to have that reflection. And that reflection, critical reflection, will help us to, when we see policies that are that we don't feel support our students, that we can do the work to call it out, do the work to make change or seek change. What else we have here? What else is necessary? Providing educators with current and culturally responsive resources in order to facilitate accurate and meaningful learning opportunities for students. Understanding them as they are known means being student-centered in our approaches, focusing on learning, not on teaching. I like that one because it really talks about learning from the collaboration of learning and not the teacher as a facilitator, and as opposed to a lecturer. Providing meaningful opportunities for students, parents, and communities to be involved in schools and all aspects of student learning. So important. Speaks to that building relationships and making sure that everyone is feeling valued and welcomed in our schools. And this hit home, adaptations should lead to student success, not student failure. Very important. So I'm going to turn it over to anyone that wants to share. Well, maybe there was something that I didn't read that you really want to. It's very hard because some of these are tiny and it's hard for me to see. But if anyone wanted to share something that that they want to share with the group, you can go ahead and pick up the mic.
Well, hi, Melissa. I wanted to kind of reflect and bring some things together. I think, what do we need to do going forward? There were a few of the sticky notes that dealt with, what do I need to do as a teacher? And one of the things that I wanted to contextualize for the group is that when we're in Nova Scotia and we're talking about, our 7,500 students, they're only 6% of the population, and as high as 9% of the student population in HRCE, and as low as 1% of the student population in the South Shore. So I would say to the educators, flip it and put yourself in a country where your child or you are 6% of that population, and you're sending your child to school where your culture and ethnicity is only 6%. And I say this having taught in St. Lucia, in Jamaica, in the Bahamas, where all the principals, all the teachers, all the parents, all the students were of African ancestry. So when we're talking about how do we link with our children, I think it goes back to what we've been talking about this whole session around relationship building, the inclusive education policy that all students deserve to come to school in a setting where they're cared about. And so the answer to trying to get to know parents and students and, you know, to get to know the Black community is basically building relationships. And that's what I learned when I did my BED in the early 90s, is as a teacher, your main thing is building relationships. Some of those relationships are going to be easier to build. Some of them are going to be a little bit more difficult, but we're still in a relationship building occupation. And so I would say that for some of the educators who were feeling a little bit concerned about how do I make these relationships, I would say just start, you know, the same way we showed those videos of getting to know the kids and seeing them as they are known at home and seeing them in the positive. And so then you'll find that if you approach the student that's in front of you as a positive young person with potential and gifts, that will flow to talking to their parents, and that will flow to going into their community for a festival or something that's going on in the Black community. You'll feel more comfortable, but start with just making that relationship with the student that's in your class, that's in front of you. And the last thing I would say on that is, if we look at the data where school hasn't been a great place for our community over a long period of time, most likely you are going to deal with some parents who are not comfortable with the school system and who may have a little edge to them because of their experience. And so I would just say, through CRP and through courageous conversation type principles, work with that parent and make that parent trust you and trust the school. And I bet you that things will turn around. Oftentimes people are in a conflictual, tense situation because they feel upset or they're harboring things that are from the past. And so I would just go back to, if you want to build on some of these 5 pillars that we are putting out there, it all starts with relationship building and that relationship of the student that is in front of you every day.
Thanks, Augy. I agree. Relationships are the key to everything, and to really setting up an environment that supports our students, all students. Want to just ask that we go to the next slide.
So folks, it's Ken Fells once again, and just going over the purpose. I'm pretty sure everybody can read this here. So I'll give the gist of what circumstances brought all this together. We know that there's a lot of power in the structures, and there's a number of systemic barriers that actually are created and create inequities within the system. So obviously we're compelled to change that system. One of the ways of doing that is through the framework that we're building, but another way is through the actual anti-racism module that we're building as well. But we need your support in all this, and that's why we're bringing folks together to actually create dialogue and safe spaces to talk about it. Next slide, please. So there are 4 points here, and again, I'm not going to read all these to folks. I know that people can understand that we've developed a framework with pillars that talk about the brilliance of our students, ensuring inclusivity, that there's the culture relevant pieces, but more importantly, that those anti-racism pieces are there too, that when we're disaggregating data and when we're looking at data and when we're formulating interest in our children in particular, that we recognize that there are deficits and we want to interrupt those deficits. So please keep that in mind, because our promise to them is to accredit their potential and always make sure that they have that authentic educational experience that is enriched and identifies them, bridges, validates, and affirms those children. Next slide. So the framework builds on a system of competencies, and that's the role of the African Canadian Service Branch, to make sure that we're inspiring you to be accountable and promote the well-being and the achievement of all students of African ancestry, to make sure that they are the scholars that they need to be. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Marlene.
Thank you. Just jumping in there. Ken. Our priorities for this year, I think going forward, these are the things that are concerning us. And I shared about those briefly. Increasing staff, the framework document, the monitoring and evaluation, the reporting, the assessments, as well as the programming that happens for our children. But I want to really quickly go on to how we're going to do this. So we know our first step is around the consistent messaging. And after this consultation, which you can see has built upon many different voices, gathering all of this information and communicating it out through one-pagers, through information sheets, communication sort of platforms to share this and to share these expectations, as well as the supports that are provided. Mentoring and support will be a key feedback, and we've heard that through the questions that you're asking. So, you know, there's certainly the expectation that as you are going out and seeking this knowledge for yourself and building relationships with families and learning about communities and learning about what the inclusive education policy says about our different roles, that we know around some of these aspects of the pillar, there will be the need to sort of come back and be mentored and to also have an opportunity to share what some of these experiences, the successes, as well as the places of learning. So that mentoring is built into the anti-racism leadership module, but it's also built in as an integral part of the framework, being able to have these conversations and to support the work. We will continue to use the inclusive education supports and that pathway as a way to build fulfill the framework. Reflective practice, that is one of the expectations, being able to pause and think about the work that we're doing, or sometimes it's the work that we think we're doing on behalf of our learners. Is it where it needs to be? Professional growth and development is another way in which we're linking to the framework, and it will be sort of built into that around the expectations, and then the ongoing monitoring and consultation and feedback. We know that some of our priorities for this year will need to shift for next year. This framework is the starting place, or I should say, it continues the work that has been going on, but our focus on the priorities are our starting place. And picks up some of the work that we have been doing over the past couple of years. But we know that as we reflect, as we grow, as we interact, as we hear, as we learn, that we are going to need to interact with the system differently to address some of the systemic barriers that are existing. I'll turn it over to Augy now. Thank you.
Okay, so it's 11:15 right now, and Marlene, this isn't a breakout room. This is just open conversation.
It can be. We can certainly use it as open conversation. There are sort of jam boards that are set up around, you know, what else is important to know. And you may have placed everything that's necessary there, but we wanted to give you another opportunity, and you can certainly use the mic or the chat to do this as well.
Okay, with the group with 15 minutes left, if we stay together as a group and we use the chat and people talking, we can still kind of wrap it up and get some final thoughts that we can take forward. Or if we go back to the general jam board, if you go to the end,
what's that,
slide. What's that, Ken? No, I can't hear you. So I think with the group for us, we could go back to the jam board, but I think what we'll do is, because of time, let's just get some feedback from the group. We just spent 2 hours plus together. We wanted to really highlight what we're doing at the branch around this framework. We've been working at this for over a year. So why don't we, like Sean Mantley just gave a question so that we can answer. So why don't we do that? Let's open up the chat to some questions, and Marlene, Ken, Doreen, Melissa, the group that's here, feel free to answer on behalf of the team. Here's one, Marlene. When will the framework be officially implemented? And no, you didn't miss anything, Sean. We've been still putting it together. It's at the last pieces, but I know Marlene might be able to speak to when we are going to officially launch our framework.
Thank you, Augie. It will be ready for September. That's our goal that we're working towards. We knew sort of gathering the voices was important to make sure. So what you have offered us today, we're going to take a look at it and to make sure that we have addressed the areas that you see as essential, but we're aiming for September 20 to begin to communicate this out.
Carol has a question here. There is a great deal of information to digest. Will we have an opportunity to provide questions or feedback as they arise in the coming days?
Marlene, jumping in again, absolutely. At the very end, there will be an opportunity for you to put down what your initial thoughts are around the sort of session that's held today, but feel free to email us your thoughts and ideas through the branch, and we'll collect all of that information out, and we expect it to be an ongoing process of learning and evaluating, and so we'll be pleased to make these slides available to you and receive your feedback.
And also, if I could kind of
Sorry, the link for, before you go, Augie, the link for our branch, Litzy has placed it in the chat for you to see.
And I also put my email just in case. Feel free to email directly to ACSB, or and also everyone knows they can go online and get all of our addresses anyway. Gail has a question. For those who are not able to make the in-person visits to the African Nova Scotian communities, there are media personalities who highlight in their social media feeds stories and achievements from ANS community. That's a great point, Gail. And I found social media, I'm older, so I'm not quite great at I don't know TikTok and Snapchat and that, but I do know Twitter. And I will say that Twitter seems to be a place where teachers are really sharing their ideas. And so, Gail, I appreciate you putting that out there, that if you can't physically get to a community, Sherry Borden-Colley, who works for CBC, she has some great stuff that she puts out. So try Twitter as a way to connect with the Black community if you want more information, because obviously I find that there's a lot there. Brian says, I appreciate the information regarding the number of students. Thinking to the low incidence of disability, I'm interested to know how the branch and other educational services can work together for African Nova Scotian students and families. Thinking to the low incidence of disability, I'm interested to know how the branch can work together. Well, I will say, Brian, I know as far as the African Canadian Services branch and our connection with the other branches in the Department of Education, we've been working and collaborating, especially under the inclusive education policy framework and that thing about working together for students. We've definitely been connected to student services, Mi'kmaq services, French language, technology, a lot of those divisions, research. We've been linking and connecting because we realize as professionals at the department level that if we're not working together, how can we expect teachers and educators and parents and students to work together? So we've definitely done a better job and are really focused on in what ways can our branch reach out and collaborate with other branches. And the main goal is to make it a better learning environment for the students who are attending schools in Nova Scotia.
And I'll just also add that Melissa is our student services consultant, and she sits at the student services, the provincial student services coordinator table. And Brian, I'm seeing that you're also suggesting links for APSI and CNIB. So those would be certainly important conversations that we would want to take up going forward so that we can sort of share and hear from your perspective what are sort of the interests as it relates to supporting students in that role. And then I saw another question about the role of ANS. The regional coordinators are critical, essential positions. What you'll notice from the role is shifting towards that focus on students and families, and supporting students and families as part of that empowering of parents and families. They're also critical because we need sort of to understand where the inequities happening for them, and being able to highlight and shift those changes across the system to address those. So they're integral to the work that we're undertaking. And there was another question I saw.
Marlene, before you go on there, I just wanted to give another point around the RCs. So from September, the RCs, the regional coordinators, and there's 7 of them across the province, who at the beginning of the year, they were new to the position. Often they were RCH coordinators before, and they had this new role. And so over the last year, I think that the branch has done a great job, and I guess self-promotion is no type of promotion, but this is true. I think that we linked with the regional coordinators, and we met with them often, and we had a great communication with them, hearing what was coming out of the regions and giving them things that we wanted to bring to the regions. But also the regional coordinators know this framework. They've seen the beginning of this framework from September when we first got together. So they're very aware of what our pillars are, of what we're doing going forward, how the inclusive education policy is linked to our framework. So the regional coordinators would be the people in the regions who have the same voice that the branch would have. And the last thing I would say about that is they are also connected more tightly to the student support workers than before, because as the branch, we connect with the regional coordinators and they connect with the student support workers, and thus we can get to the parents and students easier. So we now have a line of communication that seems to be quite successful if we look at the last school year. And the one example would be during COVID, when our students all got home and were homeschooling, we used the regional coordinators and student support workers to a great extent in order to find out what parents needed, what students needed. So we have a definite connection with the regional coordinators.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time. Let's sort of toss it over to Ken now, and he's going to take us back to the favorite quote as we get ready to sign off for the morning. Ken?
So thank you once again. Did we get the other quotes in, or we're going to use the same ones?
One second, sorry, Ken, there's just one last question from Sean. He wants to know, one second, how will the branch hold our Regional Center for Educations accountable that the framework be implemented? So it's more, he wants to know around the accountability piece.
Important question to ask. So, you know, the accountability mechanism, so we are, as a branch situated within EECD, is also around the connection to the inclusive policy and speaking to what the commitments have been made. Supporting the staff as they are working in the system, having the conversations at the regional executive level with respect to what's happening with our students. The data is a critical piece of that conversation. And so I think it's from many different angles that that level of accountability will be taking place. It isn't just sort of one way, but there is a need and to ensure that what we have committed to within the inclusive education policy, within the Black Lives Matter, that continues to be placed at the forefront. So our role is in keeping your voices, the voices of the parents, the voices of the students, the commitments, and the recommendations at the forefront as we move forward. And building those bridges and identifying the necessary places and ways in which it needs to take place. Thanks, Sean. And well, I guess I'll also say that, you know, as a provincial system, it isn't just incumbent upon ACSB, because it is the work of the regions. It's everyone's work to ensure that what happens for Black children is aligned with the expectations of the parents and their families. So moving it away from just being the African Canadian Services Branch, it is the department's responsibility, it's the region's responsibility, it's a classroom teacher, it's a program planning team, it's the administrators, it's support teams, it's the teaching support teams, to ensure that everyone understands the way forward to inspire our Black students. That's a wonderful idea, and I'll take this last question from Nancy around being able to communicate whether or not the framework is being implemented. Absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion for how we can sort of measure the implementation and what that looks like. Thank you. Ken, I'm just going to turn it over to you now. Thank you, everyone, for your questions, and feel free to email us. Thank you.
So, Ms. Marlene, are we going to share the new slides, or are we going to, or we didn't get to that?
No, we have the same quotes for this session as we had earlier. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, folks, this is real simple, and what I'd like everybody to do is, if you have changed your mind, or if you thought about some of the questions you've asked, which have been amazing, you may want to change your quote now. So we want to go back into the room, in the Jamboard room, and if you could pick out a quote or keep the one you have, it's your choice. So it's that simple, that basic. If what we talked about today made you feel something, if what we talked about today, guess what, made you think about something, and if what we talked about today, guess what, you're going to give it the boot, you know, it's up to you, it's your choice. But on the other hand, your comments are valued, highly valued, and if you pick another quote or add one to the one you have, it'd certainly be appreciated. So you have about 2 minutes to do that, and then we're going to turn it right back over to Miss Marlene. Sorry, and you can let me know in the chat if you selected a new one, if you change your mind. Let's leave it at that.
Carol has changed hers, Ken, in the chat.
Thank you. I'm suspecting that some people may change.
Sorry, I should clarify. Carol said it's not, it's an addition, not a change.
That's even better. You got 1 minute left, folks. How you doing, Eartha? You can also add those notes in the chat, folks. Be real. Thank you, Charlene. To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others. That's slamming. We got that one. With that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Miss Marlene. Thank you, Melina.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm going to conclude with the inclusive education commitment as spoken by our Deputy Minister. Thank you.
Together on inclusive education, we're going to start driving every conversation we have, every policy we write, every resource we commit to with one question. How are the children doing? We have groups of kids who are doing well. Those communities are saying our kids aren't doing well. We say, but we're doing this, 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 and this. And we are. We're working hard. And they say, yeah, but our kids aren't doing well. We said, yeah, but we're doing this and this and that, right? If we can help action to change the question from what we're doing, what difference we're making in the doing, stop doing the stuff that's not making a difference. And double down on the stuff that is, right? That's what we're going to be doing this year. We know our African Nova Scotian kids aren't doing as well as they ought to. Our Mi'kmaq learners are not doing as well as they ought to. Our kids struggling in families who are struggling every day with poverty are not doing as well as they ought to. There are other kids. So we need to respond differently.
Asking the REPs at the system level to do equity this way. If we do literacy, numeracy, think about your plans. Literacy, numeracy, well-being, equity this way, because equity has to be incorporated into the literacy, into the numeracy, and into the well-being. Because none of us got here to reach 70% of our kids. But that's what we're doing, and we're working really, really hard. So this can't be about working harder, and this can't be about caring more. Because I don't believe that educators could care more about those kids than they care now. And I don't believe that educators could work harder than they're working now. So it's about different, right? It's about different. It's about time to really challenge ourselves. So for years, if you read the literature and if you listen to people who come in and talk to us, for years, people have been saying things like, all children can learn. And yet, we have evidence that only 70% are learning well, right? So how do we close the gap between our beliefs and our impacts?
I believe every kid in this province deserves to be part of the classroom with classroom teachers. Every classroom teacher in this province cannot be expected to meet the needs of every kid in front of them. So there's a collective responsibility to helping that happen.
How safe, for lack of a better word, is it for a teacher to come and say, I got this group of 6 kids, I'm not moving. I've tried, and they're still not moving. I need help. I don't know how to solve this problem of practice. We need to make it okay to say that, and then we need to respond to help them answer that question. Our schools are built, and if you look at them, if you took the roof off and you look down, they look like egg cartons. Because they look like egg cartons doesn't mean we need to practice like they are egg cartons. And the phrase I like to use about this is, independent practicing is inconsistent with professionalism. Gone are the days, right? This province is engaged in a rigorous conversation over the last few years around complex classrooms. Complex classrooms cannot be solved by a lone practitioner, right? So if we're going to reach all kids, we can't expect teachers to individually do that by themselves with the kids in front of them. I'm going to issue to the system an invitation. We put $500,000 in the PB line of this year's inclusion money that we haven't given out yet. Because I'm going to ask schools to say, who's not there yet? How are the children doing and how do you know? And what would you like to do differently this year? And what help do you need? Do you want PD? Do you want a little bit of release time? What do you want, right, to do that? I'm going to invite principals to do that with their staffs. I'm going to caution principals that this needs to be a collective volunteer, not a voluntold activity, right? It needs to be collaborative. And then come in, and our function will be to seed as many schools as we possibly can in the work that they undertake this year. And then we're also going to say, what's the problem of practice that they said they're working on? And then we're going to say, hey, here's 10 schools who are working on this problem of practice for these kids. Let's introduce them to each other. So we're going to network schools so that people aren't working even by themselves under their roof, right? Great systems network. Anything that's moved kids is a product of ongoing professional learning that's networked. So this is not new. We've endeavored to be inclusive and to be equitable. We haven't achieved it. This is about now a deliberate and intentional focus. We took all year long to build this policy. And we did that because we had a lot of pressure from the system. Where's the policy? Where's the policy? Where's the policy? And I spoke to the commissioners, the 3 commissioners for Students First, and they said, Kathleen, get this right. Don't get this fast. And on this policy, which is not normal practice for us, I'm appending a list of everybody we talked to, because we talked a lot, right? The other thing that I learned over this journey this year is when you talk about the language we use about inclusion, the practices we want about inclusion, there is very little unanimity. And the first section of this policy says these are our beliefs. In Nova Scotia, this is what we believe about inclusive education. Inclusion is about community. It's about connectedness. It is about learning, but it's not just about learning, right? So we need to think about that. We need to think about high expectations. What's next for that kid? And we're doing it. So we're bringing the policy and the practice, because great systems find a sweet spot between top down and bottom up. And when you reach that sweet spot in a system becomes way more effective. So that's how we're going to join with the sector to accomplish this on behalf of our kids. And there's an urgency to this, right? Black Report was 25 years ago. The data on those kids has not moved. They shouldn't have to wait any longer, right? Same thing for the Mi'kmaq community and the reports we have for them, the newcomers, kids living in poverty. There are clusters of kids who are sitting in that 30% and have been for a long time, and they can't wait anymore.
We will be releasing a website with resources to help.
MTSS is not going to be a manual. Step 1, step 2, step 3. It's going to be a complement to professional judgment rooted in learning on behalf of our kids. So this is a great beginning. And I say beginning, not because this stuff isn't out there. The stuff that's out there that's supporting inclusive education is the best kept secrets in Nova Scotia. Part of our job is to uncover them and share them, right? So we're going to build on what we know. We're going to uncover new practices. We're going to support people who need to learn themselves forward differently on behalf of kids. And we're going to do it together. It's totally doable. Totally doable. That's the hopeful part of this. We can do this. And I think Nova Scotia is well poised to achieve equity and inclusivity in our education system.
This is the beginning of a year that we will be the first jurisdiction that other jurisdictions talk about when they talk about inclusivity. I know it's there. I know we're there.
There's a moral imperative to this work because all of us got into education to reach every kid. All means all, and we need to be deliberately focused on that now. So thank you. And thank you for this year and the time.
Thank you, everyone. I was saying very grateful for the time you spent with us and how you've shared your thoughts on what we have been thinking about. We're truly grateful to be at this place in 2020, to be able to take up this work and build upon the foundation, to look at what it means to be educated in 2020 and to make those changes and those shifts on behalf of the learners. They're the reason why our branch is here. We are fully engaged in the work that needs to be taken up and excited to be able to work with any of you who are interested. I put in the chat that if you're interested in being involved in the development of the framework, please just leave that on the last sort of jam board as you leave your thoughts about our time spent together. We thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing on behalf of our 7,500 Black students in our system. We appreciate you and we're grateful for the work that we're going to undertake as we move forward. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy a great day and the rest of your sessions. Bye now.